What up YouTube, Spikerord here with another video, and this time it's going to be another entry in my Unpopular Opinion series. It's been a while since I've done another one of these episodes of the Unpopular Opinion series, but I'm finally doing another episode. I wanted to save this one for later because this one and the next episode are the ones with the opinions that will give me probably the most amount of hot water. I wanted to do movies, video games, and anime first because they're fairly harmless opinions. But the opinions in this episode, and maybe even the next one, are ones that are the most likely to piss people off. But I'm going to share them anyway because I love to be so hated. So in this episode, I'm going to share opinions that are a wide range of topics. Whether it's food, societal, or political opinions. So, as always, let's start with the one that is the least likely to piss people off. And that is, I don't like hamburgers. I've actually tried hamburgers when I was a kid, and I never enjoyed them. Every time I try to eat them, there's a really fucking bad aftertaste that just kills the eating experience for me. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not one of these fucking vegans who doesn't like meat. In fact, I will say, I think chicken and pork chops taste way better than hamburgers. Hell, fried fish tastes better than hamburgers. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have a hard time enjoying red meat. I think white meat tastes better. That's really all I can say about that one. So, next opinion. Highways should have never been built in America. If this is one of the lesser unpopular opinions, I'm fucked. I feel that our constant need to make our cities more car-focused destroyed the infrastructure of many cities in the US. Los Angeles, Kansas City, Atlantic City, Detroit, and even St. Louis to a lesser extent. All these cities, and probably many more, were made worse by implementing a highway system. It led to many places getting closed and forcing people to move. Also, highways are actually a tenet of communism. It is basically the government more or less forcing people to own cars and making them pay for car deals because there really isn't a better form of transportation. I don't think that's fair. They also killed a third place. A third place is basically a place where people can socialize that is not home or work, like a coffee shop or something like that. I think a much better way of city structure would be to have cities built in a way where you have the option to own a car, but it's not required because there are really good forms of public transportation. St. Louis actually does have a pretty decent metro transit system, which is nice, but it could be a lot better without the highways and could really use some more methods of transportation and a third place. Most foreign countries seem to understand this. I'm sick and tired of the fucking political divide that is preventing any actual improvements of infrastructure. I think this is one investment in the 1950s that it should have never been made. Okay. Alright, next unpopular opinion. We're just going to keep going with these. Prostitution should be legalized in America. You would think this would be one of the most unpopular opinions, but actually there was a survey done in 2006, it was the latest one I found, that showed that the amount of people that think that prostitution should be criminalized was, wow, only 50%. I was shocked when I saw that. I thought for sure that it would have been at least 90%, but no, people seem to be thoroughly split on that issue. That is why I decided to go with this one next. So prostitution actually was legal in all states through most of the start of America. It didn't become criminalized until around the 1910s, but that was because of religious nut jobs, but more on that later. I think this law has done a lot of fucking damage. when it was introduced. A lot of people say that prostitution is a business that involves women being fucking beat up and raped by men and sold off by pimps against their will. Well, a lot of the horrible shit that is associated with this business is largely happened after that law was introduced. It is a dangerous business because it's criminalized. Because these brothels have no incentive to implement regulations to make them less corrupt. Well, the one notable exception is Nevada. Prostitution is fully legal in that state. But the brothels in Nevada are far from the seedy places that brothels are often stereotyped to be. They actually have a pretty tight security system. There's a lot of paperwork that you need to fill out if you want access into that place. They also have security cameras. This is done to prevent people who have a criminal history of rape and sexual assault from getting in. And even if a rape were to occur, the prostitute could report it in Nevada. Another reason why it's a bad idea to criminalize prostitution is because the prostitute cannot report a rape, because then the police would find out their profession and they would go to jail. That is a pretty fucking awful display of victim blaming, don't you think? It will also lead to safer sex practices. Yeah, those brothels have an insane attention to detail when it comes to hygiene. A lot of the prostitutes shower regularly. Also, to those who say that prostitution is a misogynistic business, I ought to bitch slap the hell out of you. Because there are women that willingly choose the business. And they actually have legit reasons for why they choose it. These reasons are that they like sex, the job pays well, and they like talking to people and getting to know them and what they like. It's funny that people say that it discourages sociability, even though being sociable is part of the job. I mean, you do kind of have to communicate with your client if you know and to know what kind of sex acts they want. Same thing with the men who see prostitutes. They often see them because it's really the only way they can get laid. And I think it's ignorant to assume that you can't get intimacy and connection I think it's ignorant to assume that you can't get intimacy and connection by seeing a prostitute. Women who make this argument were probably raised without fathers because they don't know the difference between a good man and a bad man. My point is, this is an archaic law that has done a lot of damage to the relationship between men and women, and I think it's time to get rid of it. Alright. Next, unpopular opinion. Christianity has done more harm than good to the world. First of all, countries that are high in religiosity and including Christianity tend to rank worse in pretty much every metric when it comes to crime, freedom, income inequality, and especially corruption and overall happiness when compared to countries that are more secular. The only notable exceptions are China, North Korea, and Vietnam. But that's because they're under socialist control. More on that later. Second of all, I blame Christianity entirely on the gender war that this current generation is having. You guys don't want to hear this, but the Bible clearly supports a deeply sexist worldview. It blames women for the downfall of society, discourages them from teaching, and says they should marry their rapist. They were not given any rights or power because of the religious dogma imposed by many countries in the past. But when feminism came, it just led to women getting increasingly angrier and angrier at men. Even if there were men who had absolutely nothing to do with the atrocities of the past. If there were no Christianity, I would argue that we wouldn't have ended up in this constant bickering between genders. And that's not even mentioning the Inquisition, where people were tortured and executed for being pagans, or the Salem witch trials, or the fact that slavery in America was vehemently defended by using the Bible, or the child sex scandals committed by the members of the Catholic Church. Let's just say there's a reason why Europe is seemingly moved away from religious dogma. Also, the Bible has a ton of fucked up, nasty stories and values in it. These actually happened in the Bible, by the way. God leaves thousands of innocent people to be killed in the Exodus story and doesn't do anything to save them. The story of Joseph and Mary sounds sweet until you realize Mary was 12 years old and Joseph was around my age. Yeah, Joseph is a fucking pedo. And there's also a ton of other ones that people can attest to, you know, women getting stoned because they're raped and being forced to marry their rapist. If you were to replace the Constitution with the Bible, you would be in a lot of trouble because, and by the way, these are real passages from the Bible. Exodus 21:7 says that it's okay to sell your daughter into slavery. Not even Nevada would pass that law. Exodus 35:2 says anyone working on Saturdays should be killed. I'm sure those people working at my job working overtime on weekends would fucking love that one. Corinthians 11:14 says if a man has long hair that he should have shame brought upon him. The metalheads would have a fucking field day with that one. If you believe that your God is infallible and has the absolute authority on everything, then you can't throw out the rules just because you don't like them. As Penn Jillette would say, read the Bible because we need a lot more atheists in the world, and nothing will get you there faster than by reading the damn Bible. I think that's what I'm going to refer to that fucking book to from now on. Alright, next unpopular opinion. All drugs should be legalized. I believe the war on drugs is a waste of time. First of all, alcohol is literally the most dangerous drug in human history, and it is fully legal. If you're criminalizing drugs for safety reasons, then you might as well legalize all the drugs on the market. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't support drug addictions of any kind. In fact, I have to say the criminalization of drugs has actually led to an increase in drug use. Because we have a lot of black markets selling illegal drugs for a cheap price and thus giving people easier access to them. We also already have the largest prison population in the world. We do not need more people in fucking prison, especially if it's only for using drugs and, of course, prostitution. Also, marijuana is literally the safest drug on the market, and there have been no deaths from marijuana overdoses. And some people even use marijuana for medical reasons. It is really the only drug I would recommend doing. Compare that to the millions of alcohol-related deaths, and you'll start to see my point. For those who still insist that drugs should be criminalized, it's all just a bunch of fear-mongering. Oh no, if we legalize drugs, there will be less black markets, less people in prison, and ironically, harder access to drugs. It's just another law that tried to solve one problem, but ended up making the problem worse and creating other problems on top of that one too. Now, you may think that I'm very left-leaning, but as you can see with the next opinion, that is going to be further from the truth. Communism is a bad economic system, and so is socialism, but there's the only real difference between communism and socialism is that communism has the promise of a better world and socialism doesn't. I have no idea why the fuck people keep advocating for an economic system that has never worked, no matter how many fucking times it has been tried. Every country that has tried to find it, like Russia, China, Cambodia, Vietnam, Venezuela, and North Korea, has always led to the country being in a worse state than it had been originally. This is because the economy does not care about good intentions. It responds to incentives that are present in these countries. If you make the same amount of money, or you have a huge amount of money only to have most of it get taxed and go into the hands of corrupt billionaires, state bureaucrats, or people on welfare that don't want to do anything with their lives, then people don't have any incentives to really work or live their lives. Also, if you actually look at the 10 tenets of communism, you will find that they're legitimately fucked up. They actively discourage owning private property, they want you to work long hours. There's a bunch of they advocate for censorship and setting up schools in a way to essentially brainwash kids into being a obedient drone and not being able to think for themselves. And they also encourage not being able to inherit money. What evidence is there? There isn't any. That inheriting money is such a bad thing to do. It is not a fucking guide to make the world a better place. It is really just the ramblings of a bitter, evil man who had no idea how the world worked. I'm talking about the Communist Manifesto. Also, those who say that it will lead to more economic equality and more equality in general clearly don't know that much about economics. Most of the tax money that you pay to the government, like I said, it goes to bureaucrats and billionaires and people on welfare. That is going to lead to more economic inequality. And besides, these are the kind of people that you don't want to give money to. Because if you do, they have zero incentive to not be as corrupt as they are. As Milton Friedman once said, a society that puts equality over freedom will get neither. A society that puts freedom over equality will get a great degree of both. Also, taxation is theft. It is literally the government taking your money without your consent. Even if you do, and to those who say that if without taxes the roads won't be built, you're actually wrong, because roads are actually built by private businesses that are just government funded. You think that those businesses can't make money without being funded by the government? Boy, are you naive. Even if you do get something good out of it, it still doesn't change the fact that it is theft. It is like a criminal stealing your money and using it to donate to charity, or stealing it and giving you a chocolate cake. Even though you got something good out of it, it's still theft. They still stole your money. Alright, next opinion. Gun control laws should be abolished. First of all, the whole philosophy behind gun rights is that people have guns to defend their rights. As a person, they have a right to defend themselves against people that try to mug them and steal their property and fight them off if necessary. If you advocate for harsher gun laws, or Odin help us ban guns entirely, you're basically saying that people shouldn't have the right to defend themselves against criminals, and saying that they should give the criminals their property. Do you really believe this? Because I fucking don't. Also, states with harsher gun laws like California, New York, Michigan, and Illinois actually do have overall higher crime rates. But states like that are more lenient on guns, like New Hampshire, Wyoming, and Idaho, have overall lower crime rates. What I'm saying is that there are other factors that contribute to higher crime. These are higher population, kids without fathers, and of course lawyers finding legal loopholes to get criminals off scot-free. It is the same thing with the rest of the world. Even countries with harsher gun laws, they can still have higher crime rates. When people advocate for gun control, they're only looking at gun deaths. They're not looking at overall homicides, robberies, rapes, and aggravated assault. If they did that, then they would quickly realize that their argument doesn't have a leg to stand on. Saying that there are more gun deaths in America is an obvious statement. A society with more guns is going to have more gun deaths. But that's no different than saying that there were more sword deaths in the medieval times. But again, that's because there were more swords. If you think that the police should only have guns, then you have way more fucking faith in them than I do. Do you really think that a police officer won't abuse that authority and shoot an innocent person? Boy, are you naive. When gun rights activists advocate for gun rights, they're not just saying, oh no, they're going to take my guns away. It's, oh no, they're going to fuck everything up by letting criminals off, mug people left and right, and leave my house to get robbed, and I won't be able to defend myself against any of it. You see, gun control is not as good as you think it is. Alright, next unpopular opinion. Gambling should be legalized. I'm starting to notice a pattern with victimless crimes. They seem to be made to solve a problem, but they actually ended up making the problem worse. But to quote Milton Friedman again, government solutions are just as bad as the problems. Much like with prostitution, I would argue casinos rigging games is so that only the house wins is largely because casinos are not recognized as a legal business, so they have no incentive to make this casino safe for your money. Now, I won't pretend that gambling is completely harmless. If you lose, it can really fuck you up. Or no. If you lose, it can really fuck you up. But it is not even guaranteed that you will lose. In fact, games like Baccarat ensure that you do get a little bit of the money back, even if you do lose. And this is a game where the house has the advantage, so they make it fair. Also, countries like Italy, the United Kingdom, and Australia have gambling fully legal and have more freedom than the US does. Is it not sad that we're even less free than Italy, a country with strict blasphemy laws? Gambling is far from the worst thing a human being can do. I wouldn't even put it in the top 20. Much like all these victimless crimes like drugs and prostitution and pornography and polygamy and probably many others that I can't think of off the top of my head, you're not really hurting anyone if you do it. But are you really the victim if you love the pain? It seems like Nevada is more free than most of the states of the US. Alright, final opinion. I am anti-natalist. I'm saving this one for last because it is not only very unpopular, it is a philosophy that on the surface seems like a philosophy that no one in their right mind would ever subscribe to, until you find out why they would. So for those of you who don't know, anti-natalist means you're against procreation and having kids and think it is wrong and unjustifiable. So hear me out on this one. First of all, the child cannot consent to being born. It is just not possible for them to choose to live in this world. There's far more pain than there is pleasure in this world. Things can be loud, they can be gross, and they can be painful. Um, is it wrong that the child doesn't have to experience all that? Is it bad that they will miss out on all the pleasure if there's so little of it? Trust me, if I were to given the option to live and I had known that my life would consist of living in a nation of hypocrites, not having much freedom, a mother who scolded me for simply doing what I liked and for my libido, and even put me through psychiatric therapy because she thought I was sick, and a brother who was a complete dickhead who somehow got less scolding from both of my parents, I think I actually would have turned down the offer and just not have lived. The pleasure you experienced in this life doesn't really outweigh the pain, especially since a lot of it can cause you pain in some ways. So you may think that I believe women should not have the right to have children, but I actually have the opposite concern. I'm actually more horrified by the fact that women are essentially treated like baby mills and more or less forced to have kids. Because I know how painful it is for a woman to have kids. It is so painful that women have actually died from having children. The US has the most amount of childbirth deaths in the world. I would feel so fucking shitty if I made a girl have a kid and she died because of it. I don't think I could live with myself knowing that she not only died because of me, but she died suffering and in pain because of me. I don't want to hurt a woman unless, she was attacking me or she was really awful or some shit. Also, according to the scientists, the Earth can only support 2 billion people. And we have, 7 billion people in this world? So we are way overcrowded. Maybe it isn't a bad thing that we have a birth rate decline. Also, for those of you who are going to use the fact that I support laissez-faire capitalism against me, here's my counter argument. Most of the countries that have high birth rates are the ones that are very strict and controlling. They have high religiosity and don't support laissez-faire capitalism. Most of the freer nations have lower birth rates because women have more autonomy and are not treated like baby mills. There's also the fact that finding a partner to have kids with is painful. I think I speak for all people who choose to remain single or people who are in bad relationships when I say this, but there are not a whole lot of good partners out there. I really fucking hate it when, let's say, older men try to encourage young people to start having kids because they think it is noble and they think it's a selfless act. Considering that those kids will be born into a slow motion apocalypse and be forced to play a rigged game of life, if having children is anything but noble or selfless. Also, for those who are going to use my the fact that I advocate for sex positivity against me, well, sex positivity does include safer sex practices that pretty much prevent you from having kids. So don't even bother with that. What we should really do is make life more bearable for the people who are still here. After all, nobody asked to be born into this world. I think it is more noble and more selfless to do something nice for someone or give them some pleasure. It may not get rid of all the pain, but it will make this world a little bit better than it is. Finally, and maybe this is just a me thing, but I just think babies are ugly. I don't find them cute in the slightest. So, yeah. Leave your love and leave your hate down in the comments. I didn't expect this video to get this is serious, but hey, you don't always get what you expect. And you know, maybe that's a good thing. I thought I would be alone on all of these, but there's plenty of people that, there are people that do agree with me. So I'm not alone. Maybe not a lot, but the more people that do, the better. Anyway, I'm Spike Robot. If you like this video, you can subscribe to my channel, and feel free to support me on X, Instagram, Patreon, and Pinterest. See you later on the Freedom Jingos.